Greetings and salutations. I wanted to make a video about how to choose a godparent. The normal practice in America nowadays, it's a sad result of the changing culture, is that you tend to see a lot of people separate from their godparent. Their Iyatobi, their Babatobi, their Oluo, right? And it's very sad indeed, right? I blame it on the fact that most people aren't from this culture to begin with, and so they have sort of that American idea that everything and everyone is disposable, right? You're not fulfilling my needs, I'll find somebody else who will, right? And it doesn't really work in Orisha. Ask anybody who's separated from their godparents, regardless of whose fault it is, and it's always a sad situation. So for any of you who are not initiated, and those of you who are initiated, I hope to give some advice on how to go about this. And for those who are initiated and who have or will have godparents, this advice is good for you too, because sometimes we forget we were on the other side one time, right? And we've sort of absorbed or become absorbed in the title of Santero, right? But it's also important to remember that our job is to foster and bring up all people who come to us as devotion. We're servants, okay? If you're a Santero and you don't consider yourself a servant, you might be in the wrong line. You know what I mean? Wrong line of work. Okay, so to the Aleyo, to the uninitiated, to the Ogberi, whatever term you want to use, piece of advice number 1: take your time. Take your time. I'm going to give the example of 2 years. 2 years. You get initiated, 2 years down the road, you realize you and your godparent do not get along that well. You separate. Now, if you would have waited those 2 years, you'd have gotten to know your initiator a little bit better. And before committing to do Ocha, you may have decided not to do Santo, not to do Ocha with them to begin with. Now, it is a catch-22, right? You have to understand from the priest's perspective, and it's important that you understand things from the priest's perspective too, right? The uninitiated actually make up the bulk of our house, right? The majority of people in our house are not initiated. It's logical. You can't have the biggest chunk of people being the initiates, right? It doesn't make sense. And so what happens is, with just that vast number of people, there's only so much individual attention, right? You can spread out about so many people depending on how big a house is. And so at first, when we first meet each other, right, I want to get to know you, I want to meet you, and we get the pleasantries, and I'm willing to teach. But you can't always expect that one-on-one, all the time, right? So it becomes, I'll use myself an example. I'm married, I have children, I have my regular job, right? So as far as time constraints go, right, how much time, not that I want to, I'd love to spend every minute with you, right? Teaching you about the ways of Ocha, but when it's too many people, it stretches the priest way too thin, right? And and then you want to go further with that person, so you want them to initiate, right? So that you can start getting into the deep nitty gritty, right? Not that it's a rush, but at the same time, sometimes the Aleyo just, even years after years after years, just want that individual attention all the time, and without realizing that it's just hard, right? So so that's the catch, right? The Aleyo may think, okay, I've been in another 2 years, and at first it was paying a lot of attention to me, and now, he takes, oh my God, a whole 48 hours to return my call. Hey, it's not that trust me, it's hard. Believe me, it's hard to get back to everybody right away. So it's sort of an interaction between, respecting the time of individuals. As people, we have to respect each other's time and things like that, right? So don't feel, but also don't feel pressured. Don't feel pressured if you're not ready to do it. Don't do it. I can't say that enough times. Don't feel pressured to do it, right? You have to expect that his time or her time can be stretched thin, and so you have to be okay with it. Okay, this is my place. As the uninitiate, it can't always be about me, right? It can't. Of course, you should always be able to schedule one-on-one time with your godparent, no matter what your level of initiation is, right? You should be able to schedule it. It may not be immediately, and that should go for people who have something too. Nobody should be able to say, "Hey, I'm coming over right now, and you have to see me." That's not considerate as people, right? But you have to understand time constraints, and there's only so much a godparent can teach you. So as long as you're comfortable with what you can and cannot participate as an uninitiate, then take your time. Take your time to get to know your godparent, right? And not necessarily in the one-on-one. When I say take your time to get to know them, that's also seeing how they interact with the other godchildren, right? The older godchildren, right? The way they act with the older godchildren is the way they're going to eventually act with you, right? So let's say you're the new guy, right? And they want to impress you, and they're showing you their best fit. Isn't that what we always do, right? When you meet somebody and you want to get to know them, you're always showing them your best face, and then with time you get to know all the other parts of the other sides, right? And so don't expect for a santero to be any less human, right? So observe them, observe their interactions, observe how they are with the other godparents, with the other godchildren, right? If they're constantly yelling at their other godchildren and not you, you think you're special, or you may be special now because you're the new guy, but eventually you're going to be one of the older godchildren, and chances are they're going to behave the same way with you. You see that they're nice, they treat the other godchildren with respect, they treat everybody with respect over long periods of time. Now that's a different issue. Also remember, I forgot if I'm numbering my rules here, or my advices, so I'm just going to go say the next one. My next piece of advice is take responsibility. One thing I've noticed on the net, on the web, is that every time that there's a split between godparent and godchild, it's always the godparent's fault. And hey, I hate, and this is as a person who has every single one of his crowns still in their house, right? I hate to be the one to break it to you. No, it's not. It's not always the godparent's fault, okay? It's this nice little thing that we say online to not let the new people be discouraged with the faith and whatever, right? It's not always the godparents' fault, and I'm going to continue in the next video with why.